Welcome, everybody, to the Adult Chair. My name is Pete Wright, and I'm here, as always, with Michelle Chalfant. Hello, Michelle.
Hello, Pete.
How you feeling today? How's your kung fu?
This virus is never-ending with my cough, but hopefully I'm getting a little bit. It kind of comes and goes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your energy's up, though. That's what counts, right?
Yeah, no, my energy, I feel energetically fine, but, a little bit of a cough, so.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
Spring break is over. We are back to the rigmarole in many places in the country, and we're getting back to ourselves and our real lives. And today we are going to be talking about the evil that lurks in the hearts of men, the shadow. I so could have been an old-timey radio guy. That is my thing. I could have done it. But before we do that, you should go get to know a little bit more about this show and about Michelle at michellechalfant.com. You can find links to the podcast. You can listen to the show live right on the website there, and you can call us at 931-463-3813. Once again, 931-463-3813. We'd love to hear your voice and get that voice on the show. So call us and leave us a voicemail. You can find us at Facebook, facebook.com/Michelle Chalfant fan page. Mostly just search for Michelle Chalfant. It'll come right up. Mm-hmm. And, of course, Mitch Chalfant on the Twitter. But all those links exist right on the website. We'd love you to jump in, fan up, like up, tweet up. We're all about that stuff. Okay. Old business is out of the way.
Done.
So now we're talking about the shadow. I got very excited when you said we were going to talk about the shadow today, and I realized I'm very excited, but I don't really know what it is. It's a totally irrational exuberance about the shadow.
The shadow part of us exists in the adolescent chair because it's an unconscious part of who we are. It is they are, not it is, but the shadow parts of who we are the parts of us that we want to keep hidden. They're the parts of us that we don't like. When we are children, 0 to 7, remember, is where everything gets recorded, and it's just deep in our unconscious. Everything is it's kept in memory, but in the unconscious mind. So we don't exactly remember it because it's so deep down hidden below the conscious mind. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm trying to rationalize what exactly it is that we are hiding. Are we talking about some sort of a trauma or abuse or? For
example, I'm going to give you an example.
Okay.
When we're growing up and we might hear something like my grandmother used to say to me, shame on you. Shame on you, you did blah, blah, blah. Or shame on you, you're this. Or, when you took, this doll away from your sister, you're so bad. So what we do when we're children is we don't interpret that the action was bad. We interpret that I am bad. So I don't interpret that, I have shame. I should be shamed because, I pushed my little sister over. What we interpret is my existence is shameful. Like I shouldn't even be here.
Okay.
So we own it. It becomes part of our identity, and it's so incredibly painful that we hide it. So the mind hides it somehow, and that is what we call our shadow. It's an unconscious part. It becomes unconscious because it feels so painful. We don't want to see what it is. We don't want to own it. So we push it down and down and down. The thing is that it still exists within us. And how do we find out what our shadow aspects are? There are a few different ways that we can do that. We look at what triggers us. And I know I think we did a whole podcast on triggering, but we look at what triggers us because what happens is the unconscious parts of who we are get projected out into our reality. And that's then when we get triggered. And that's how we then can see what our shadow parts are.
Okay, that was episode 5, by the way.
Okay.
Addressing our triggers. So our triggers are sort of that's the key to figuring out our shadow.
That's one way, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm struggling a little bit trying to figure out how to, where to go with this conversation, because part of it I want to go back to, what it was, how to build a healthy relationship with our children. Now you've got me thinking about that. But the second is, what is it that we're trying to unlock? What is the range of kind of emotional outbursts that can come from, not healthily addressing our shadows?
Are you saying, you said with your children? Or just in general?
Well, no, and I'm saying it with my children, because what you immediately said to me is, your grandmother says shame on you, and I immediately think, I need to. I don't say that, no, lest we go too far. I don't say those words, but it's making me really second guess everything I say to my kids because they're little recorders, right? And they're at that age where they're recording everything I say to them. What am I doing that is validating them as human creatures and focusing on actions instead of people? And that's an important thing for me personally to think about. So I don't know if we need to talk more about that specifically. I don't want to create shadows. I'm like a little shadow manufacturer for my kids. But so we can move on from that. But the second is, what is it that we're trying to unleash in addressing our shadows as adults?
What we're trying to do, we're all on this life journey, and many of us are also on a spiritual path. And in my opinion, that's really what that means to me is I want to get to know myself completely, all aspects of who I am. I want to live from my true self. I want to live from my real self. I want to live in my adult chair. In order to do that, we have to look at every aspect of who we are and love that part too. But I can't love it if I don't even know it. One of the parts of us that lives in this adolescent part, which is the ego, the unconscious part, are these shadow parts, are the unconscious parts that are, again, I'm bad, I'm shameful, I'm controlling, I hate myself. So what we want to do in order to be authentic and real and own all of our stuff is we're really bringing, if you think about that we're all energy beings, what we're doing is bringing just some of this darker energy, which is the shadow, into the light. We're bringing light to it. And when we own it and take responsibility that it's mine, and I'm not going to project it out and blame you or anybody else for the way I feel, that's where the healing begins. It's just in owning it.
I'm thinking specifically about vulnerability. How does vulnerability serve this discussion?
Let me give you an example. Yeah, being vulnerable is key to this whole process because we want to the only way to get real with ourselves is when we're vulnerable. On Super Bowl Sunday, I was in the grocery store, as was, I feel like everyone else in my entire town was in the grocery stores. It was like a mob scene, right?
Right.
So I'm pushing my cart around like I do every single Sunday. I'm grocery shopping. And then I realized I'm seeing a lot of people that I know and their carts are extra full. So without me even asking them, I'm interpreting and I'm assuming, I'm in my adolescence saying, wow, they're having a Super Bowl party and I wasn't invited. So I'm pushing my way through the store. And again, nobody said, I was like waving hello to people like from across the store, but didn't even say anything. But I noticed that I started having some serious feelings about all this. I wasn't invited. I'm left out. And so by the time I'm like in the frozen food section, and this is a real story, this really did happen to me. I had such knots in my stomach. I had made up this huge story that everyone else in town was having a party and I was the only one that was not invited. So
do you know what I do in those situations? Like when I get triggered, I can just imagine walking through the store and thinking, well, if they're all having a party and I can't come, I'm taking all of the frozen French fries, and I'd end up with like 50 bags of Ore-Ida French fries, and no one's going to have any French fries if I can't come to the party, huh? How do you like me now? Like, that's a total fable. We've talked about that, but it's so dark.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So I'm walking through, and I really sat there, and I go, oh my God, I'm having like panic. But by the time like I'd gone 3 or 4 aisles, and my mind started doing what it does, it's the ego. It just keeps going over. And I started feeling more and more intense emotions. I'm buying, in fact, my kids loved it because I buy really healthy stuff and they get mad at me. But I was buying all this crap because I was so out of my body because I was in so much panic. Anyway,
because you end up in this story in your head of what would it look like if I were having a party, and then subconsciously putting more Ore-Ida French fries in your basket.
I had like stories and assumptions like crazy. Yeah. I talked to like one person for a moment, and we didn't even talk about having a party. But I'm like interpreting, so it's getting more and more intense. But so finally, I get to this frozen food section, and I stopped, and I said, "What am I feeling?" I know what all my thoughts were. And I know what all my stories and assumptions were, but what the heck am I feeling? And I went through this, and I'm just in my mind doing this. Nobody knew what I was doing, but I was like, I feel so left out. I feel sad. I feel lonely. I feel, I went down my list and I just kept slowly pushing my cart, but still feeling everything. And then I, bam, hit the bottom, which was, I feel so bad. Like, I'm bad. And then below bad was not anything more than I'm wrong. Like, me, Michelle, my existence is wrong. Like, there must be something just so wrong with me that I'm not invited. Not that I did something wrong again. I'm wrong. So that was it. And I was like, whoa. And I felt like I had a boulder in my stomach. I was like, oh my God, that feels so awful. But that was the shadow.
Wow.
So the shadow is again, it was, if I didn't stop myself and ask what I'm feeling, I could have gone home and had a bottle of wine. I could have called a friend and bitched about how much I hate it here. I could have done all of these things that we do to numb out. You name it. I could have gone shopping, whatever we do to numb out. But I chose to sit in it because I really want to know all aspects of myself. And it doesn't, by the way, mean that it's right or wrong. It's just, this is just what I'm feeling. I got to access that child part to know what I'm feeling. And I did. So I said, wow, I'm wrong. That felt so yucky. But then I did some deeper breathing. This is all in the grocery store, mind you. And I was like, just let me get out of here. And then I just kept breathing because breath moves energy, which moves emotion. So I kept breathing and I'm like, I'm wrong. And I just allowed myself to be in that. So that's having awareness from my adult. She was able to come in and just be with me in that emotion. I got out to the car and I sat in that feeling again. I'm like, okay. So I felt like I was just breathing it through, like, I'm wrong. I'm just wrong. My whole existence is wrong. And that does not feel good, by the way. But I know I need to feel that in order to feel this wholeness and complete and love all aspects of myself. So when I was done, when I felt like it was done, it just was an intuitive, like, okay, I've done this for a few minutes now. I've really been in it. I need to know what's true. Like, am I really wrong? Like, is my existence wrong? And that's, again, where we need our adults to come in and go, what's true? And I thought, you know what? I'm not wrong. Like, I'm okay. And then I felt myself, I had rolled down this hill like a big boulder and I hit the bottom. And then I started almost like walking back up the hill, but with new awarenesses. So then I said, I'm not wrong. Like, I'm okay. Like, sometimes I may be wrong and that's okay. But it's not who I am all the time, 100% of the day.
Right.
And I walked myself out. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, so there is a part of me that feels that she's wrong. Okay. And I was able to really go from this state of panic, and then walk my way out. And then I felt neutral. It wasn't that I felt glorious. I felt neutral. And what was really interesting is the few people that I did talk to, some of my friends locally, the day after, I said, what did you do for the Super Bowl? Nothing. What did you do for the Super Bowl? Nothing. Most people I know did nothing. So
they were all stockpiling crap in their grocery carts because they all had those stories.
But what was so cool is I knew that it was this is how we find our shadow. So that shadow part, I don't want anybody to know that I'm wrong.
Right.
Who wants to feel like their existence, not something I did, but me, Michelle, is just wrong and I'm marred. There's nothing I can do. So that's the shadow. That's the part of me that somewhere, maybe when I was 3 years old, who knows? I think we talked about this before, but being in the crib, if you cry and your caregiver does not come in time to give you your bottle or pull you out of the crib, there's a feeling there like, wow, I'm not wanted. Boom, it's recorded. It's in there. There's a shadow.
Wow.
You see, it's like all of these things happen when we're so young and they get misinterpreted because we don't have the logical mind to interpret, to make reason of, wow, my mom was, if I'm 3 months old, I don't say, wow, my mom was showering and she didn't hear me crying. We don't realize any of that our adult mind or the logical mind would realize. So we record all of these experiences and they're not healthy for us, and they're not exactly accurate because we didn't have logic added to what we were feeling. We just had the feeling.
But it's almost like by design because we record all these things, but we're not even equipped to address them until we reach a state of sort of emotional cognitive maturity.
Yeah.
This is what I've been dealing with, and this is why I brought up vulnerability, because I think it applies. I don't really have much of a competitive bone in my body. Like, I'm not a very competitive guy. I don't typically try to kind of be the first in line. I don't typically, I just am not that guy. I was never really into sports. I was always the theater kid, and so I was always on stage. I had different needs that needed fueling, and so right now I've been invited to join, or I was invited to join a photography cohort, and it is introducing me to, and I've been, shooting pictures professionally for, better part of a decade. And this is the first time that I am entering into an environment that encourages judgment and critique. And I find myself, I just had my first one over the weekend. And leading up to that, I found myself in really a constant state of panic. Right. It was such a trigger for me, knowing that this person who was a significant force in the photography community was going to be looking at my work and telling me what was good, but what was I focused on? What was wrong? Right. And that caused me to live in a state of such anxiety for days once I knew it was scheduled. And I realized there is something about that. That is a shadow for me. It feels like, understanding what you're talking about here, that it hit a trigger for me. And that anxiety was something that was recorded for me early on about this idea of judgment. Passing judgment on what I create. And so, as it turns out, as you may be able to predict, that turns out was a fable. The experience was fantastic, right? It was really fantastic, but it took everything in my power to even show up at this thing. It took everything in my power to show up. And we've got these things scheduled now they're coming now. These regular critiques are coming, and so I know I have to get used to it. But it's this sense of how, what do I need to do to remain vulnerable, sort of constructively vulnerable to this idea, to facing my shadow. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yes, and I would say the vulnerability piece is key. And one question that I ask myself, and I would encourage you to ask yourself, and anyone that wants to dive deeper into their shadows would ask this question. Here's another way to find them, because they hide. They're in the shadows. It's hard to find. They are a shadow, but they lurk behind us. We don't know where they are. Ask yourself this question: what are you afraid people will find out about me? What am I afraid of?
Oh, yeah. Well, that I'm a fraud.
Right. And that's the exact part that you have to own.
Yeah.
And then I always ask this question, okay, so if I'm a fraud, what does that mean about me?
I don't know. Give me a sample answer to that, because when I'm a fraud, what does that mean about me? Makes me think, I'm a fraud.
I'm a fraud, that makes me feel what?
Yeah.
If I'm a fraud and people find out, that would make me feel what?
Well, shame, loss, loneliness.
And we can answer those questions with responses like that are mental, or we can allow ourselves to feel them in the body. And we know we've accessed them when we link it into the body. So when you say,
what does that look like?
So I'm going to ask you. So when you say, excuse me, I feel shame, loss, like you're really quick to go through them.
Yeah.
When you just say, okay, it would make me feel shame. Where do you feel that in your body? Where's shame in your body?
Just kind of right below my solar plexus.
There you go. And then when I feel loss, where do you feel that?
A little bit higher in my throat.
Perfect. So that tells me that you're really experiencing those feelings. And remember, I'm not asking people to feel their feelings and get stuck in them forever.
Yeah.
This is a process of what we want to do is to learn how to feel our feelings, good or bad, okay, or positive or negative, because there really aren't bad feelings, and allow them to flow through us. So we want to feel the loss or feel your shame, go, wow, there it is again. Yeah. And then it flows through us. Own it and touch it. what we do is we hide. Like, you don't want anybody to know that you're a fraud. I don't want anyone to know that I'm a fraud. So what we do then is we wear a mask. This is all from that adolescent chair. We wear a mask and we show up maybe at work projecting out or acting like, hey, I know everything and nothing ever gets me down and you take the greatest pictures and I'm not afraid of these judges. And, that's the mask. Versus like, wow, I'm really, I'm a little bit worried or I'm excited, but I'm also a little bit afraid. Like, that's being real.
Right.
That's
it's a funny bit of brain damage that sort of evolves, right? Because I know if you ask me cognitively, well, are you a fraud? Well, my answer is, no, I'm not a fraud. I have been doing this a long time. And yet, I think it highlights the difficulty I have, and I'm sure others have, in saying, I have a lot to learn.
Yes. And let me just comment on what you just said. I'm not a fraud. This is why I said way in the beginning, I think about who we are. If you think about who Pete is or who Michelle is, see like a picture of me as a puzzle, but it's like a 1,000-piece puzzle, or yourself.
Yeah.
So if you could take a picture of who you are with all these and then crack it into 1,000 pieces, one of the 1,000 pieces feels like I'm a fraud. So it's not all of you. It's one little piece. And those little pieces are the shadow pieces, the pieces that we don't want anyone to know about.
Yeah.
The parts of us that we don't even want to know about. So we shove them way, way, way down into the unconscious. It's like into the abyss of the ocean. It's like, who knows where that is? But they keep showing up in our world until we look at them. And we see them when we're triggered, when we have these dysfunctional patterns that keep replaying over and over and over. And the way that we find them is to become aware and start owning it. Start owning things like, hey, so instead of saying I'm a fraud, it's like, there's a part of me that feels like he's a fraud. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
who cares?
Sure. Yeah.
It's a teeny, teeny, tiny part. And then when I own it and pull it out, it's like, oh, that's not so scary after all. You see, this is what happens in the adolescent because it's the ego. The ego says, if you feel that, you will die. Keep that tucked away.
Oh, yeah.
Keep it tucked away.
Yeah.
So guess what part of us says, no, I'm ready to take a look at that. And I want to take responsibility that that's just a part of me. That's the adult.
Okay.
Our adult comes in and says, no, it's okay. And sometimes it's good that I'm a fraud. It's okay. Sometimes I've got to wear a mask. It's okay. All of it's okay. And that's what we realized. I was working with a guy that I love, one of my clients. He's a great guy, and he's got a lot of pain and addictions, and he wears a mask like we all do, but one of his masks is that he's this great guy and he's working so hard and all of these things, and his life's going to be fine. But right now it's just a little bit tricky. So I just looked at him and I said, just let's face the fact. And I actually used a swear word, Pete, but I'm a screw up. I said, I didn't say screw up. I used the F word, but I said, just say it out loud. I'm a screw up. I want you to say it. And he got really uncomfortable, and I just kept saying it over and over and over until he broke down and started crying. And he said, okay, I'm a screw up. And it's like, what a relief. Yeah. That's how we feel after.
Yeah.
It's like, we don't want anybody to know that I'm a screw up.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody. That's the shadow. It sneaks around. It's sneaky. It's hidden.
It is sneaky. And
we don't see it.
More often than not, the secret that we're trying to keep from the world, that it's building that pressure inside of us, right?
Huge.
That's what it feels like. It's building that pressure, and the world doesn't actually care.
No. And do you know how much energy it takes, we expend on pushing these emotions down?
Yeah.
Tons.
A lot.
People say that all the time to me. When we do shadow work in session, they say, oh my God, I feel so much lighter. I feel like I've had this huge release. Oh my gosh, I had no idea how much energy I was using to hide that from the whole world and from myself.
Exhausting.
It's absolutely exhausting. One thing that really helps too, I might have mentioned this before, is if we can have somebody that knows this work that knows this adult chair work, just one person even, just one. If you have more than one, that's great. But almost like an accountability partner or an adult person that you can call, someone that knows this work really well. So when we're stuck in something or when we're in the middle of an emotion, like I was in the grocery store that day, it's nice when we can call someone and say, hey, you know what? I need an adult. Will you just be my adult? Because this is where I am. I'm sitting and feeling, for example, for you, if you were feeling like a fraud and I'm sitting in shame, can you help me? I'm not sure what's true because I'm swimming in this shame and I can't get my way out. Then we have someone that comes in and says, okay, that's great. Here, I'm with you in your shame, but here's what I know that's true. You, Pete, are a fabulous photographer. I know that's true. And I know that, and then we kind of build from there. So we help. It's kind of like when we fall in a ditch, someone's putting a ladder in for us. We don't 100% need someone like that, but it's very helpful. Yeah. Even if we just have one person. And if not, again, we learn to do it ourselves, for ourselves.
Right.
So like I was in the grocery store and nobody was available. So I just sat with it and I kept asking myself, oh, wait a minute, like what's true? What's true? Oh yeah, well, am I really just wrong every aspect? No. In fact, I've got some really good qualities. So anyway, I was able to climb out of the ditch. So it's not a necessity to have somebody, but it's nice. It's just a nice thing. And I've heard other clients and girls in my group, they'll say to me, it's really cool. Like, who wants to be my adult? So if I need help throughout the week, can I call you if I need an adult? And it takes like a minute or two. It's not like you need an hour with somebody. You just say, oh yeah, let me just tell you what's true. Well, this is what I know to be true about you. So it's another adult. I notice in my couples, when I work with couples, they can show up and ask each other the same kind of thing. Hey, I'm really triggered. This is what I'm feeling. Can you be my adult? So that's just a little added tidbit for people that are listening.
I like it. And as always, I appreciate it. It's this one, you should probably go back and listen to the triggers one after you listen to this again. So go back to episode 5. These are related topics. And I think it's a good one. So thank you, Michelle, as always, for your kind and gentle wisdom. Mm-hmm. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Don't forget, find us on Facebook and Twitter, and go to the website and subscribe to the show for free. And make sure you never miss a single episode. We would love to have you as a regular subscriber. So thanks, everybody. On behalf of Michelle Chalfant, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next week in the adult chair.